Source. Hello, we're back. Alrighty. Aha. So yeah, you have to mute yours so you don't get the sound coming through. Make sure I'm streaming still. Alrighty, welcome to KRL Arts and Games, episode 3. I got a little new bumper intro there. I don't know if anybody saw that, but it's not very long. This episode is Other Worlds, is the name of it. And we're putting this in because, once again, our game has been delayed another week. Good reasons. And hopefully we'll be doing it again next week, the game, that is. Today we have my friend Josh here, one of the longest modern, my last, 5 years we've been role-playing together? I think something more, maybe more than that.
I think it's longer than that.
Maybe 7, 8 years.
I think like 5 years online.
Yeah, so, and then a couple years before that.
3 years before that.
Yeah. So yeah, 8 years probably. Cool. We've gone a lot of fantasy worlds, and I think that's what this is about, our sci-fi worlds. I will get right to it today because I'm going to be talking about my my enjoyment of science fiction and fantasy started with probably reading books. So I was went to a small church grade school, and so needless to say, I didn't have any fantasy or sci-fi books in the library there. I remember reading stuff like Pilgrim's Progress and just religious oriented stuff. And then they would have a catalog. They would come around like once a year, twice a year. I don't know if all schools got them, but it would, like, you could order calendars and posters, cat posters or nature
Scholastic
catalog.
Yeah,
I don't know what
it was something Scholastic.
See, this might have been a religious, but I couldn't have been because, okay, the last page of it this year, it's like I remembered going through, but this year must have been like 75, 70, somewhere around there. Because it was right before Star Wars, I think, somewhere right around that area. They came out, and last page had some science fiction books on it. I was like, Star Trek. And I was like, I might have watched Star Trek once or sneaked a peek on it, as like turned the TV on. I was like, oh, this is awesome, but now I couldn't watch it. Okay, so I like Star Trek. And there was like 5 of these Star Trek log books, and I was like, I don't know what that is. I have no idea what that log means, but I'm like, I got enough money to buy 2 books, like $5 or something for 2 books, right? Or $4 or something like that. So I was like, I'll buy 1 and 5. That way I'll have the first and last one. At least I'll have the beginning and the end of it. I don't know. So my guess, I was like 9 years old or something, probably 8 years old, 9 years old. So I was like,
did the catalog always have Guinness Book of World Records as one of the options?
Probably.
Then I think we're thinking of the same thing. Because that was the one thing I always remember being on those catalogs.
So it's my oldest books. I still have them. Star Trek Log 1 and Log 2 or Log 5. Finding out later, as I grew older, that they were off the cartoon, which I never saw. But yeah, here's like they show the picture of like all the different books that you could, like 1 through 4 when you got 5. And I was always like, 2 through 3, I could have had them. Now I have them, of course, but like it's crazy that that's when you're in a fundamental religion, you had to kind of go through loops to get to some of your future enjoyment. Fine, I don't disparage their thing, but for me it meant a lot that I got those books, and they were something mine, and I kept them all these years. Little cover wear, but they're my thing, Now, over the years, I've read a lot of science fiction and fantasy and horror, and enjoy a lot of different authors. But at the beginning, it was just Alan Dean Foster. And then my brother went off to college, and he left his books. He would get books, and he'd leave them behind in his room. So I'd sneak in there and see what he has, and ask him eventually if I could read them. So he had the complete 4-pack, little box of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. They were all in a little box. He had the paper packs, and then he had the Dune. I think he had the same kind of box thing with like 3 Dune books originally. I think, yeah, 3 Dune books: Dune Messiah, and Dune God Emperor. So I soon read those. I was pretty young, probably 11, 12 when I started reading those. And he also had the Dragon Riders of Pern. I don't know if you ever heard of the Anne McCaffrey books.
Heard of them. Didn't read it.
Once again, a trilogy. So I read a lot of trilogies or things at the beginning. But, of course, Alan Dean Foster was my first. So I think I'm going to talk about that from this first half hour of... we usually run for about an hour. I do half an hour, and you talk through it with me, and then the other half hour, vice versa. So I'm going to go to discontinue this and go to this and web browser. Why am I on there? Oh yeah, Star Trek logs. See if that comes over to the. Yeah, I have a little delay. Oh, there's a. Did you get it over there quicker than me?
Yeah. Yep.
So you can see the logs. I already showed you. I had 1 and 5. Now I have the first 10, I believe, all 10 of them. Yeah, I think there was only 10 of them. So, but the intriguing bit about these, you would think it's a kid's cartoon, right? Star Trek was kind of oriented toward kids a little. Well, I don't know, supposedly. But Alan Dean Foster wrote it as if he was writing it for adults. He didn't know better.
I don't think it was necessarily meant for kids, though, because I think I never watched it, but I remember reading that a lot of the episode ideas came from ideas that were never used for the original show.
Okay.
So I think he was still just translating those episodes.
But it wasn't a kid's catalog, it was cartoons. It was just odd, It was just odd. So it hit me that this was a pretty deep written, well written, very atmospheric, had a lot of background. The one that the first log one, it's 3 stories, in each, and it was one that's where Spock goes back to his home, transfers his consciousness back into his childhood's consciousness and relives his childhood, which is an odd plot. They did a cartoon of it. I've seen the cartoon of it, but yeah, the cartoon's only like 22 minutes long and everything. The book, it's 100 some pages, of the book. It's like it's really well drawn out story. You get all these dramas with his family and everything, and feeling like an outsider and going on his own and almost dying in a desert. And you're like as a kid, you're like, he's a kid, I'm a kid. He's weird, I'm weird. And it meant a lot to read something like that at that age. I think. I always thought Star Trek or Spock was my favorite. Then after that, I think. And then soon after, my brother would buy me some books, and I believe he got me the Ice Riggers series next. So actually, I think that was the second one in 74. Yeah, 74, 79, 80, but 74, I read the first one, Ice Rigger. And then eventually I read Mission to Mulligan and The Deluge Drivers. Mulligan? I don't know how to say that. But yeah, they're all set with a kind of cat people. I don't know if you read this series.
I have not.
On an ice planet, and they have skis for feet, where they're like claws go underneath their feet and become skis. And they have these big ships, but they have skis on the ships, and they use them. They're the ice riggers. And it's a guy, just normal humans that come onto this, crash on this planet and have to survive and learn how to interact with these aliens. And that are like barbarian somewhat, but know some technology, and then they have it's a very intriguing world that he creates there, and intrigued me a lot, and it's one of my favorites of his series. Then I soon after started reading his Pip and Flicks series, which is his earliest. In 1972 was his first novel that he created, but For Love of Mother Not's actually his first chronological order of a story of a young boy. Once again, write what he knows when he was a young boy so he can kind of figure it out. That has kind of a powerful telepathic and telekinesis powers that is outlawed because he's genetically engineered, but he finds all that out as he goes through, and he's a hero, and he takes his powers to find out kind of bad things that have happened. But he's got this flying little dragon, it's snake kind of creature. That's Flinks. No, that's Pip. That's Pip. And it spits out acid that can dig through. So we got alien acid coming out of its mouth, and we've got a little mini dragon from like that Dungeon Dragons eventually took over, So, both invented in 1972 by Alan D. Foster, who was ahead of his time in a lot of stuff. And as you see, 15 novels. He's written a lot in that series. And then I didn't
realize he was still making them 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
For this series.
Then, okay, so those are his big series. He created a universe for those two series. He created a universe called UMAX, UMNAX, because the humans and there was these ant-like creatures, praying mantis ant-like creatures that are stand-up aliens, about this little shorter than humans, that are as intelligent as humans, and they were the first ones to become allies of humans in the universe. So they're Thranks, and humans are humans, and UMAX is the commonwealth that they put together. Kind of like Vulcans and humans becoming, And so these books were just set in that universe, but are individual books. And Midworld was one of my favorites, and I think it was one of my first hardcovers I owned. And it was a world with trees, with a forest of trees that were massive and filled up everything. So you would and he had biomes of different things living in multiple levels of this massive forest. And no one ever hardly got up to, if you got up to the top of the forest and looked out, you just see the tops of trees for as far as you can see, and massive birds that would kill you instantly. So you didn't stay up there for very long. Yeah, it was a very deadly world. One of the killer worlds that people told you not to stay at. So I love those books. Those were early books of mine. Spellsinger was his fantasy series where everybody was, where a normal human got transferred to it, and everybody was kind of, what was it called when anthropomorphified, where it's like all the animals were humanoid, kind of. Yeah, otter. There was like a little otter that would follow him around, but they're all foul-mouthed and human-like, So it's like, and he became a bard. He's got this. He was a rock wannabe player in our world, and in that world, suddenly he has power. He found some kind of weird guitar that had power, and he was able to use magic through his guitar. Spellsinger, of course. I don't know if. You said you've read some. Which have you?
The Damned actually is the series that really hooked me with him.
And I did.
I'd read some short stories, but
you told me about that one, and I did read all three of those, and I liked them a lot. Some of these I haven't read totally all of them, but the Founding of the Commonwealth I've read. I haven't read the Taken series or the Tipping Point series. I'm working on Ocean Earth, which is kind of odd. And then he's novelized movies. It's one of his biggest things.
His specialty.
And he started it off, and they don't show it on this page, but he started off with Star Wars. And that was one of my other, right after the Star Trek, I think, but before I got any other books, I got Star Wars, the novelization. and he ghost wrote it. I mean, not ghost wrote. He wrote it, but his name's not on it. He sold the rights to, so they always have Lucas's name on it. But he actually wrote the words in novelization, and he got to write his own Star Wars book. That is like the sequel that no one's ever used because they wrote their own sequel. So I've always thought that was funny. Maybe I'll find that in a second. So yeah, of these, let's see. There's the Black Hole, Outland, Clash of the Titans, which I love that one. I love the old movie in '81. Krull, The Man Who Used the Universe, and these are actually ones that was like his own. He didn't novelize that. That one he wrote. I love that one. Slipped, he wrote. The Eye Inside, he wrote himself. But as you see, Last Starfighter, Starman, Pale Rider, he created Into the Out Of, which is his own. Glory Lane, more of these are his own that he wrote. Not movies, but then in the movies, which they don't show there. Oh, here's Star Wars, Splinter of the Mind's Eye. That was the one that he did on his own as a sequel. So he finished up the whole Star Wars tale in it instead of making 2 more stories. So it had a lot of action all in one book.
Interesting.
And, it's well written. It's definitely not the same thing as what Lucas eventually did. But then he did Alien movies. He got into a lot of different series, the Transformer series, the Star Trek movies, Terminator. He even has a short story for Dungeons and Dragons for Forgotten Realms. I got that book. And anthologies, a lot of anthologies. And let's see, there was some other Star Trek movie. So Goodreads has a lot of stuff about him. He was I've met him once. That's the other thing I want to mention about him. Back in probably 91, 92, he came to a science fiction bookstore in Bolingbrook, and I got him to sign some books, said hi to him. It was pretty cool to meet a guy. He had a lot of connections to Hollywood, so it was intriguing to find out a little tidbits about stuff and how Hollywood did stuff and everything. And I've gone to his website. There he is recently. He's a traveler. He loves traveling the world. Takes a lot of pictures of his travels. He loves to go to exotic places and see exotic. Oh, that one didn't want to come up. There we go. Going deep sea fishing, doing shark hunting. He talks about all of that. He's getting older now, but he did all that. And I think he's still a professional weightlifter. For his weight. I mean, there's different people in different ages that have it and stuff. So I think he still does all that stuff. So yeah, he's one of the first people to have a author that had a website. I don't know if he's in Russia there. I don't know where he is. Cook Islands. Bora Bora in the sunset. I'll leave it there. But yeah, I even have the generic universal role-playing system, GURPS. Created a module for his UMAX worlds, and so I have that version. So I never played GURPS, but I at least have some of his role-playing stuff written for him. And what else? He never really got any of his stuff into movies or TVs, but of course, the other way, his stuff, he's written a lot of the movie stuff, so it's awesome. And I really don't have much to say more about him, so I think I'm pretty much done with my half. You can actually, unless you have something to bring up with him.
No, I was going to say, I think he did better than making stuff that got turned into movies. A lot of the novelizations that he did for movies give you details that might not have made it into the movies. that I believe he did the Revenge of the Sith book, if I'm remembering correctly.
Don't know about that.
I'm trying to remember.
He's done a lot of. This one has a lot of publications, Dinotopias, that I haven't seen other places.
I know I've read a few of his that were based on the movies, but they would explain things that happened in the movies that somehow just got missing from the movies. And
Revenge of the Sith.
That's the one that stuck out in my head, and I can't remember what detail it is.
But it says publication novel with Terry. Oh, with Terry Brooks. So he co-wrote it. I see what you're saying.
Yes.
So this Stover guy and him wrote that together in 2005. I did not know that. I got Force Awakens and A New Hope, of course. See, this one says he wrote the first one in 1976. And then the Phantom Menace, I have that one too. I did not have the Revenge of the Sith one.
Yeah.
It's a good one, you're saying?
Yeah. I just remember him explaining something about what Anakin's thinking at some point that I really wish they would have thrown in the movie, because it would have made the movie make a hell of a lot more sense. Like, instead of just watching, Hayden Christensen's expressions and trying to figure things out of what's going on in his head. It's, and he's great at filling in those details.
Yeah, I don't know about these books. A Dangerous Game. See, it's not his name on there, by Jude Watson, so I don't get why it's on this list. I don't know. Publication order of Star Wars Legend books. I guess some of his are his and some of our other people's.
Yeah. I wonder if this is not like producer credits but something similar.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, he lives in Arizona. He has a nice place there. He's been on. Last I read, it was turning out okay, but he's been on a list with Disney. Don't get angry at me, Disney. But the story is that he wasn't getting paid for the stuff he wrote that was still getting sold through Disney. So like the books he wrote, those last few books for Phantom Menace, Revenge of the Sith, Force Awakens, especially Force Awakens, they're like, when they bought all the stuff from LucasArts, for millions of dollars, they're saying they own it now.
Our contract.
Yeah, that's not our contract. And he I think a lot of other authors were looking at what he would come out of it, because he was the first one to complain about it. And I guess it came out okay. I think the last I read somewhere it came out okay. Maybe not. I don't know the true stories for everything, and I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, I didn't know about that part. That's kind of sad, but yeah, that's not an author I would want to get on the bad side of. He's working with me.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting older, so he probably didn't have to, have as much of a dog in the fight. But still, and plus he's got so many books outside of that. But still, he had put a lot into Star Wars at the beginning, So, alrighty, so we'll call it a day on this. I'm gonna go through some other authors in the future. But what would you like? You're going to be talking about next, and I think it was a pretty good time.
Yeah, pretty much history of my nerddom, I guess we could call it.
Okay. Other worlds that you got into.
Yeah, I could have actually gone on a similar path to you, because mine also starts with Star Trek.
Okay.
Just not specifically Alan Dean Foster, but that was really my first genre thing I got into.
Did you play the Star Trek D6 version? Is that the version I'm thinking of?
Star Wars had the D6. I didn't.
Oh, what was the Star Trek role-playing game that was first?
I have books from it because I wanted like the details they would have on different vessels and stuff.
Yeah.
But I've never actually played a Star Trek RPG. One, I didn't know anyone else that was playing at the time, and
FASA tried there in 78.
Yep, FASA was. It did most of the earlier ones for sci-fi, I think.
Well, they had the battle game fast.
But yeah, and they would give all the stats on the ships, both for how it would be in real world weapon descriptions and their gaming rules. So, yeah. When knowing every vessel that was in Starfleet was gonna...
Did you have the Starfleet Battles game?
No.
Oh, okay.
You just had one on the screen before you scrolled up. It was like the ship manual or something that's on there. Keep in mind, this was long before I started playing any RPGs. And that's kind of the weird thing, because Star Trek kind of got me into sci-fi, and I would probably give Lord of the Rings credit for getting me into fantasy. But I did not. Yeah, it's the one in the middle, like that says Federation on top. The ship diagram.
This one. Ship recognition manual?
That looks like it. Yep. That was my first one.
All right.
But yeah, that was just for the details on this, information. And of course, I would have the things like Star Trek timelines and
right.
But
I don't know if I still have it, but I had the blueprints. You put it in a little. It like came in this plastic little sleeve thing. And it was all the blueprints for all the levels of the Star Enterprise. Did you have that?
Those were my favorite things to find at cons. I'm pretty sure they all got destroyed in one of my moves, but I did used to have those.
I had the first one, so I know they made other stuff eventually, but yeah, I had the first one.
Yeah, I mean, my Star Trek addiction kind of started to wane. I've actually just gotten back into it because I started watching Picard.
Awesome. Did you watch the last one?
Have they released the third episode yet?
No, the second episode.
Then yes.
Well, no spoilers for anybody else who hasn't seen it, but definitely a love letter to the old fans of Next Generation.
Definitely.
Let's throw it all in. It's like, let's throw every trope from Next Generation right into one episode.
It is an Easter egg bonanza, yes.
Or from other series too. Like, yeah, it was great. But yeah, it's more for people who I know about it, I think, than new watchers, I would say. But
yeah, I'd have to agree.
I think you can enjoy it as just an action sci-fi sims. Yeah, it's hard for me to say.
True. Once you're in it, you're in it.
So yes, so you've been getting into Star Trek again because of that.
But yeah, it wasn't until I was 18, 19 that I actually played Dungeons and Dragons for the first time.
Did you play any other role-playing games before that?
I had not.
Okay.
Yeah, it was one of the things a couple of my friends who had been playing forever introduced me to.
Which version was it in?
Second edition.
Second edition?
Yep. And it turned out the reason one of my friends introduced me is because he was looking to get out of it and sell off all his books. And it worked.
I got given books. You got sold books.
Well, I did have the advantage at the time that, well, for one, I was still living at home, so all my income could go into that sort of thing. But also, I lived in Milwaukee, which is not real far from where TSR had been based.
Sure enough. Yeah.
And Half Price Books was heaven for me because anytime TSR had a misprint, any little error, they would just give batches of books to Half Price Books. And so I have about 90% of the second edition books on paper.
Here's the main books right there, right?
Yep.
Except the Monstrous Manual is the second version. They actually had to.
I'd say a lot of these came in different. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, that looks like the collection I have.
Did you ever use the Dungeoneer Survival Guide or the Wilderness Survival Guide? Because I always wanted to, but I never got it into a game.
Yeah, I always had them, but yeah, no one really went into that much detail. I was playing more than I was DMing at that point, and by the time I really started DMing, it was really when Third Edition came out. So, and that was an entirely different beast.
You want to talk about your second edition world then? What campaigns did you play in worlds?
Well, my original DM, the one who ended up selling me the books, he was very into Greyhawk.
Okay.
And he was definitely an old school gamer. Like, if there wasn't one death Ascension, he figured he was doing things wrong. I ended up playing a lot of Ravenloft.
Okay.
And I know nowadays that means something different to most people than it did then, because whole campaign setting then, they're starting to reintroduce some of that. But it is more than just Curse of Strahd.
Well, it started. Yeah, it started off with this Ravenloft, this version here, the advanced D&D version of Ravenloft, and then when second edition came out, they're like, oh, let's start a whole realm of terror. So they put the Ravenloft Realm of Terror out.
Yes.
And then they started splitting off into different realms that were part of this realm of, I don't know, I didn't read it all.
Yeah, well, no, it's essentially accurate. They it was kind of a strange setting because you'd have everything from Stone Age domains to Renaissance domains where everyone's using muskets. And they even made a version called Mask of the Red Death, which was their attempt to do a Cthulhu-like thing without being Cthulhu.
It'll pop up in a second here.
All the Victorian-style horror.
So did they have pistols and stuff in that one?
Yes. Yeah, that one was also more modernized. And, you had your psychologist-type classes, the alienist.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, period specific. But, instead of, it was more like detectives than thieves and just a more modern focus on it. It's, that was one of my early favorites, mainly because the DM that we had, he allowed just about anything. So you could have the most overpowered characters. And it kind of went against the grain for Ravenloft because you're supposed to be in, terror of these Dark Lords who can pretty much squish you at any time they want. And instead we're like going around Ravenloft, taking them all down and, but it was good fun.
They sure had a lot of boxes out for it. I didn't realize all these were boxes.
Oh, yes.
Can you see the stream? Yeah.
Yep.
So the main box, Realm of Terror, Forbidden Lore, which I think I own. I found cheap once, so I bought that one, but I don't think I've dug into it much. Requiem, Grim Harvest, Bleak House, Death of Rudolph, something. A Light
a lot of these,
Belfry.
It's the Van Richthofen, Death of
Okay.
Van Richthofen.
Okay.
And that's kind of why there are so many box sets. Is of all the second edition ones, this is the one where I think history would progress the most.
Oh,
Forgotten Realms is kind of the same, but as the novels would be introduced, there were Dark Lords that would get killed, and other Dark Lords would rise in their place. New domains would appear. The last thing they did was actually, instead of a box set, at the end, TSR was just doing source books.
mm-hmm.
It's kind of how it. I'm not sure if it started before or after they were bought by Wizards of the Coast, because they still published this TSR for like 3 years after being bought out. But
They were one of the longer titles that kept putting stuff out. I know that.
yeah, Ravenloft, once it started production, was in there till the very end.
The Domains of Dread. Yeah, it was all these, but it was another plane, right?
Yeah, it's the Demi plane of Dread is how the setting was known.
Yeah,
and there were a lot of good novels that went with it too.
They went through and found out, like, I think every trope that was horror, like ghosts, Frankenstein, vampire, everything they could think of, werebeast. They went through and codified all
Dr. Moreau.
Yeah, codified it and made places for it and made rules for it. It's pretty much a long, detailed design that they did. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, the number of support books that they had, even that were, they would have some mechanics, but there were a series of books that were Van Richten, his guides,
right?
And they would go into the details, like, I mean, they couldn't use the origins of like Frankenstein as a book, but they would make their own version of that history and background and how the created came to be. And they actually did a really good job with making it part of their universe instead.
This is the only version I ever have played, was the computer game, the Ravenloft computer game. I only played the first one. I didn't play this. I think Stone Prophets.
I did not even know that existed until just now.
Yeah. Or maybe Strahd's Procession, I think, was the first one, and then Stone Prophet might have been the second one. Yeah, it was done in the same time as the Menzo Berezan and the end of the Eye of Beholder stuff in that area. So
nice.
You might want to search for that sometime.
I was going to say, when I get my my classic computer set up, I will have to try and hunt that down.
It's on Good Old Games, which is where most of my games are, for $10 for the series, which includes Stone Prophet and Strahd's Procession. 1994 it came out. Will run on Windows 7, 8, 10, 11, Ubuntu, and Mac OS 10.
I don't even have to wait. That's nice.
Buy as gift. So I own this. Yeah, so I have it. It's in my catalog.
Hey, and I don't even have to mess with DOSBox.
It comes with a DOS box. It runs automatically in itself. So you don't have to do anything. It does it itself.
Very nice.
But it comes with manuals and the clue book. Yes, the game is powered by DOSBox. I still don't understand why you need 2 gigabytes of hard drive space for this.
Yeah, that's definitely an increase over the original.
Yes. Someday I might just build my Ubuntu machine and get some stuff running on Linux.
Right. Yeah, that's why I'm having to I suppose I should call it my Wayback Machine, because that's what it will be. Just so I can play all the older games in their original formats.
But yeah, Ravenloft definitely has an atmosphere to it, and the new Curse of Strahd for the newest edition of Dungeons & Dragons has always intrigued me, but it's intrigued a lot of people otherwise, and it seems like they've all touched it. I don't know if anybody who's finished it, but then again, I'm one of the few people that actually finishes campaigns, I think.
I'm not going to lie. I'd really like you to do it so I could finally finish.
And it might be a few years before you will, but I will do it. And, they'll probably have 6th edition coming out, but I'll stick with 5th edition and my stuff for a while, I'm sure. I'll be an old codger playing it.
Yeah. Someday we might have to have one of these discussions about what 6th edition is going to be, because
there we go.
I'm hoping it doesn't change too much. I really do like 5th.
Once we get some rumors or get a test coming out or something for it.
Yeah.
So what? Oh, Ravenloft. What was your next bigger? Did you do any other campaigns in the 2nd edition, or are those pretty much your two?
A lot of homebrew.
A lot of homebrew. Well, I can't pull those up.
I had a good friend who is actually the inspiration for a character in the Lost Citadel.
Okay.
It's before 3rd edition came out. Wizards of the Coast had been asking people to tell them about their characters, and there was a chance that their favorite character might be put into a campaign. So if you have played the Citadel Erky Timbers.
Yes.
That was my friend Eric's character. And he always had a homebrew campaign. Before I moved from Milwaukee, he had actually given me a lot of the material for his campaign world. I still have it in a folder somewhere.
A lot of people have drawn Erky Timbers in their.
Erky has become a legend. Yes.
The Sunless Citadel, which I ran you guys
Sunless
through.
Citadel. Thank you.
With Meepo.
The Citadel part.
With Meepo, one of my favorite role-playing NPCs.
The other classic.
The only adventure I think I've ever DM'd twice, too.
Yeah, it's short and sweet. It's a good starter.
Yes.
It really is. But yeah, his homebrew campaign was actually the one we probably played the most. And that was another incidental one where I didn't know he played Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
I had a couple of friends who lived in the same duplex. One of them owned the bottom part, and I was visiting my friend who lived upstairs, and we just kind of ran into each other, and turns out they were going downstairs to do a D&D game, and he didn't know I played either, and he was like, well, come on down, let's have an even bigger group. And bravest DM I've ever known, because I don't know anyone else who wants to do 8 to 10 players at a table.
I've had one before, yeah.
It gets crazy. But he pulled it off. It's he was our DM for most of the time in second edition.
I'm showing the map from Sunless Citadel as I remember it well.
Ah, yes. Yeah, I've played it enough times that I might be able to get through it through memory now.
Especially if you have this map that shows you where all the traps are.
I still trigger those. It doesn't.
I remember the trap in here, but oh well.
Especially the room. I won't give spoilers.
Okay.
If you see a couple boilers, though, watch out. It's. But yeah, so a lot of Ravenloft and the homebrew campaign until third edition.
Sure. Okay. So D&D third edition, you were right there, I guess, as it came out, huh?
At the Gen Con for the release, because that's back when Gen Con was still in Milwaukee.
Yeah. I don't know if I went to the release one, but I was probably the year before or the year after. No, probably before.
You could tell Wizards did not quite know what they were doing yet, because they would have these sessions where it was like, all right, everybody sit down and make a character, and then we'll do this quick mini thing. And for anyone who's ever played third edition, you do not make a character in 15 minutes.
No.
Especially if you don't know the system already. 15 days, maybe. It's a very rule-heavy edition. If you like detail, it's very good.
It became that way, that's for sure.
Yeah. And if that sounds appealing, then the modern way to look into it is Pathfinder. They're kind of the spiritual successor.
These are all the 3.5 version, which they found out a little bit of their rules weren't that great, but they didn't want to throw it all away, so they created an updated version. Got to sell all the books again.
Yes. There were more third edition books than I am pretty sure any other edition ever had.
And they created a D20, which is a license using a computer ability to make an open source thing and saying, okay, but you have to put our license on it when you do that, and we have to approve it a bit, so you can't do everything you want. But once you got past that, you can sell it and make some money on your own. And of course, everybody.
And it was a versatile system, too. Yes. Along with third edition D&D, you had the D20 Modern. They also brought Alternity is what they called it, but it was essentially Gamma World, which was a much older sci-fi setting that TSR had made. And that's another note I should make. During this time, I also had discovered White Wolf games as well.
Oh, I never knew you played White Wolf.
I, again, did not play as often as I would have liked, just because I did not know enough other players that were into it. But it definitely inspired, when I started making campaigns, a lot of their books and mechanics inspired my settings.
There's the original one coming up on the screen.
Yep.
The Masquerade.
Yes.
With the red rose.
And oddly enough, I knew more people who played these games as MUDs instead of as tabletop games.
I knew if I actually was in a live action, which was one of their things they started doing, and it was all the good goths love doing it.
That was actually one of my first experiences, was going to a Gen Con, and that was the first time I ever was in a LARP before I knew what a LARP was.
Yeah.
And they were doing a ball where everyone was different characters, and you all had different secrets that you were hiding, different things you were trying to do. And you had to mix and mingle with people to meet your goals. And
so
that was different.
Of these systems, let's see, there's the werewolf one. I think that was just called Werewolf, right?
Yeah.
The Apocalypse.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, they all had little sub-names.
And then there was Mage to Ascension, which is the only book I ever owned. So I was thinking, well, if I ever play him, I'd be a mage.
And that was a great setting.
Yeah.
Mage was actually my favorite as well.
And then there was a few others. I'm not sure what.
Oh, they had Changeling, Wraith, Hunter. Hunter was basically for people who wanted to play D&D still. You could go after all the other supernatural creatures in the game.
Exalted was near the end, I think, right?
Yeah. I think that might have been separate from the rest of them. The rest of them are in a continuous universe.
Yeah.
Like, the rules were compatible enough that if you wanted to have a campaign where you could be any of the creatures, you could have a changeling, werewolf, vampire, mummy party.
But it's one that I mean, other than being, and I was an NPC in the LARP, so I didn't actually play the game. I was just a person that was, well, I was actually selling artwork to a role-playing company that was in a game store, and that's where I would meet him and talked about my art I was doing. And then they were playing it at that store. The other people were playing it at the store, so I got kind of corralled in. They're like, "Hey, you want to be an NPC? You be a FBI agent or something." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Nice.
So it was a one-time thing, but it was different. But yeah, they were serious about it. That's for sure.
Yeah, they really were. It's kind of funny, is especially living in Milwaukee at the time, you know, other than Gen Con, it's not really the big gaming place. But White Wolf actually ended up doing a source book about vampires of Milwaukee simply because it always took place in,
Right.
they wanted something to sell at Gen Con.
Okay.
So,
You have that for you always then, the Gen Con.
well, what's hilarious though is if you look at the way vampires set up, a city the size of Milwaukee should have maybe 6 vampires at most. And instead, it has a whole ton because there was a war going on between younger vampires who don't necessarily follow the rules, called anarchs, and the vampire establishment. And so, yes, I came from the vampire anarchist city.
Fair enough. So, dalliance to White Wolf Games, and then third edition. What campaigns did you play in third edition?
Well, the first one was really Forgotten Realms.
Okay.
And that was probably because they came out with an excellent source book. I mean, it already had lots of history from previous editions, but the source book they came out with for third edition was super complete. It
Well, we have a certain someone to thank for that. What's his name again? Greenwood? Dan Greenwood?
Ed Greenwood.
Ed Greenwood, that's his name.
Yes.
So this book right here.
When they first bought his material and said they wanted to make a campaign of it, but I forgot where I read this, but they started receiving like these file boxes full of material, maps, his writings, binders. In the end, I think they said they had like 10 of those boxes full of material, and they had just asked him for like a synopsis. But that's what happens when you ask a librarian to make a campaign, I guess. He was very thorough.
So third edition started getting these kind of books coming out, right? Yeah, even after the second edition was around, so I guess you could use that. But third edition, they started coming with the white, kind of off-white with kind of a leathery.
Well, that was the Forgotten Realms theme, at least.
Right.
Kind of the other thing was that third edition, the default setting was Greyhawk, which
I was
they had
getting
never
into.
really had a default setting before. And those were all the standard brown color, like they did with their handbooks and everything.
Well, we're getting last few minutes here, so What do you want to go into other editions, or do you want to stop kind of on this one and talk a little more about third edition?
Well, actually, it's kind of a convenient place because third edition, I played it in a few different ways. Also, Star Wars ended up getting bought by Wizards of the Coast.
Sure.
And they made a couple editions that ended up with Saga, which kind of led into fourth edition. Like, you could tell they were experimenting in their Saga edition with a lot of the rules.
Wrong things. Just say Star Wars Saga. You get a lot of other stuff.
Yeah.
Wizards of the Coast.
But
Saga.
Gotta say, I was not a fan of fourth edition. I bought the handbook and I went to local game store and did a couple of one shots and just wasn't for me.
Was this
played Pathfinder instead?
Oh, that's fine.
And that's where we met. I think.
Yes,
it was in Mike's campaign.
We did. We met in the Pathfinder, building off of. Yeah, it was a melding of Pathfinder and 3.5 rules. I think he used a little bit of each.
Yes.
But it was a Greyhawk first edition
against the Giants
adventure that he rewrote, and it was all first edition campaign world pretty much. He was old school.
He was an old school DM, yeah.
He was my age, so what do you want? We're old schoolers.
Yeah.
But yes,
there's nothing wrong with it. It's become its own genre now.
I thought I run slow campaigns, but that was a one we didn't go very far in the years we played there.
Well, when we had to take breaks to watch Big Bang Theory, you knew something was, It was much the friends meeting as gaming 90% of the time. So,
well, yes.
I wasn't eating pizza anymore.
I wasn't eating pizza anymore, but I sure smelled it a lot and lived vicariously off of you guys.
Yeah, I just felt we were being kind of rude with that, but
it's okay. But I was kind of jealous always.
I understand.
But I'm going to take us off of this screen and go back to the talking on each as a double screen here. And so, did you enjoy this little episode we do? Kind of a little filler episode.
It'll get us through. We'll get back to gaming someday, Steve.
Yes, we will. You would think I'd be creating more and more for more and more episodes, but it's like if I do that, I'll forget what I'm ready to do, so I can't do too much ahead, or I'm like, I'll be lost when we come. So I gotta kind of leave it there and I'm ready. I'm ready to stomp on that next part of the adventure.
I know I'll have to watch our last two actual play sessions again before we play.
I usually watch at least the last one just to get the where is the story going?
Right. Where have we been?
Alrighty. Well, on that note, I'm going to say goodbye to everybody. Thanks if you've watched. Thanks in the future if you're watching. And let's see. Really, nobody's chatted, which is fine. But at least I got some content up, which is important in the world. Alrighty. I'm